Moments before a violent gust lifted their camper off the ground, 9-year-old Tyler was yanked out by his older sister, who heard the structure creaking. "I don't know why, but I just grabbed him and ran," she said. Seconds later, the wind tossed the camper 50 feet across a field, smashing it into trees. The family had ignored evacuation orders, thinking the storm wouldn't hit hard. Officials say the siblings narrowly avoided tragedy. "If she had waited even 5 seconds more," a firefighter said, "we'd be telling a different story." After the hurricane and widespread flooding along the southern coast, rescue teams found 17-year-old Lucas Reyes floating alone through a submerged neighborhood, clinging to the door of a refrigerator. His family's trailer had been swept away overnight. Using jumper cables, Reyes tied himself to the door and drifted for 16 hours through dark, debris-filled waters. "I just kept thinking I had to stay awake," he told medics. Cold, dehydrated, and covered in cuts, he was taken to a local hospital and is expected to recover fully. Emergency officials called his survival remarkable and credited his quick thinking under pressure. After the storm passed, silence fell so suddenly it felt wrong. Everything that once made sound, birds, cars, wind chimes, was gone or broken. James stood barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the sky. His house had lost half its roof, and a pine tree lay across his porch. But all he could think about was how quiet the world had become. "It felt like the wind stole the noise," he later told a neighbor. That night, he slept on a mattress in the garage, listening for anything to return. During peak gusts, Harold Grant stepped outside to check on his generator and was lifted off his feet by hurricane winds. He landed 30 feet away in a muddy ditch, stunned but alive. "It felt like a hand just picked me up and dropped me," he said. He suffered bruises and a fractured wrist, but managed to crawl back inside his home before the next wave of wind hit. Emergency crews later found trees snapped like twigs in his yard. "I'll never take wind warnings lightly again," Grant said from his hospital bed, smiling weakly. During the height of the storm, a power crew spotted a cow standing calmly on the second-story balcony of an abandoned motel. The wind had apparently pushed it up a ramp and into the building. The balcony railing kept it from falling. It was safely led back to ground level once winds died down. Locals now call it the flying cow miracle, and the motel owner says he's never seen anything like it. "Still had better manners than most guests," he added. In one neighborhood, a woman returned to find her brother's car still in the driveway, keys inside but no sign of him. His phone last pinged from the cell tower nearby minutes before landfall. Teams searched surrounding woods and ditches. As of Friday, he remains missing. It is one of 127 open missing person cases linked to the storm.
I have no idea how strong these winds are, but I'm getting hailed on.
More than 800 homes were damaged or destroyed across the three-county region after the storm's landfall. Preliminary aerial surveys revealed entire neighborhoods with only concrete slabs remaining. Emergency services reported over 1,200 calls in the first 12 hours. Winds exceeding 130 miles per hour tore roofs from apartment buildings and scattered insulation across highways. Officials estimate it will take at least 6 months to restore power fully. "This is the worst structural damage we've seen in decades," said the regional director of emergency management. As students and staff were being evacuated from the local high school, a massive gust tore off the gymnasium roof, sending metal panels flying across the parking lot. Surveillance footage shows teachers herding children out just moments before collapse. "We had 20 seconds, maybe less," said Principal Harris. No one was injured, though several cars were crushed by falling debris. Officials say the storm's wind speeds exceeded 120 miles per hour. The gym, built in the 1960s, was not rated for such conditions. Classes remained suspended. "We were lucky," Harris added. "That wind came for blood." When the winds began tearing shingles from roofs, 68-year-old Lester Jennings ran outside to retrieve his garbage bins. A sudden gust knocked him off his feet and sent him sliding across his lawn. He grabbed onto the metal base of his mailbox and held on as the wind roared over him. "I thought I'd be blown into the next county," he said. When the storm passed, he was soaked, bruised, but alive. His mailbox was bent and his house badly damaged, but Jennings credits that metal post for saving his life. "Strongest thing I ever installed," he joked. In the early hours after the hurricane made landfall, 62-year-old Marvin Ellis carried his paralyzed neighbor 2 miles through waist-high floodwaters to reach a rescue point. With no cell service and streets submerged, Ellis wrapped the man in plastic sheeting, tied him to his back with extension cords, and waded through swirling debris. "I couldn't leave him. He's family," Ellis said. Both were treated for exhaustion and exposure. Paramedics say their survival came down to Ellis's strength, calm thinking, and deep sense of duty. "He saved my life," the neighbor whispered from his hospital bed. After the storm, a cross made of driftwood was discovered lodged upright in a sand dune where dozens had sought shelter. Locals have since preserved it as a symbol. "It felt like he marked the place where we were saved," said one evacuee. "We'll never move it." An old man stood in the ruins of his workshop, running his hands over rusted tools he'd once polished every week. The wind had knocked down one wall, but left the other 3 standing, like a set on a stage. He didn't speak much as neighbors offered help. Instead, he swept sawdust from the floor, straightened a stool, and set a bent hammer carefully on the bench. "It's not gone," he finally said, "just quieter now." A caravan of RVs and pickup trucks crawled along the interstate, packed with families, pets, and everything they could strap down. Some pulled boats, others had tarps over furniture. Gas ran out in 2 towns, and the National Guard airlifted fuel to stranded drivers. It was the largest civilian evacuation the county had seen since the 1990s, with more than 150,000 people leaving in under 48 hours. During the worst hours of the storm, volunteer firefighter Dana Price made solo trips by boat into flooded neighborhoods, rescuing 11 people, including a bedridden woman and 3 small children. With official resources overwhelmed, Price launched her own kayak from the fire station and worked through the night. "I just couldn't sit there and wait," she said. Battling wind, darkness, and floating wreckage, she pulled one family from a rooftop using bedsheets as rope. Residents are calling her a hero. "She didn't hesitate," one survivor said. "She saved us when no one else could get through." When the hurricane hit, 16-year-old Brianna lost nearly everything. Her family's home was badly damaged, and most of their belongings vanished in the wind. But 3 days later, a neighbor found her bright blue prom dress tangled in a tree 3 miles away, still intact. "It sounds silly," she said, "but it was the one thing that felt normal." Volunteers cleaned and restored it. Local businesses are now planning a community prom for displaced teens. "After everything we've lost," Brianna said, "this one dress being found made it feel like hope's still out there." An entire field of solar panels was ripped from its mounts and scattered across neighboring properties. One panel pierced the roof of a church 2 miles away, embedding itself in the pews. Another was found stuck in the side of a moving train. Despite the destruction, no injuries were reported. Engineers say wind uplift during the storm exceeded what most solar farms are designed to handle. Cleanup could take weeks, with fragments turning up in yards across 3 counties. No one expected the tree to survive. It had stood in the town square for over a century, and as the storm hit, people watched it bend almost to the ground. The next morning, every building around it was damaged, windows shattered, signs ripped off, but the tree still stood, stripped of leaves but upright. Someone tied a ribbon to its trunk. 2 days later, others added flowers, candles, handwritten notes. It became a quiet monument to the idea that some things, even in chaos, can hold fast. I was holding a mug of coffee when it happened. 1 second, the porch was there, the swing, the plants, the little welcome mat. The next, it lifted like a magic carpet and vanished into the sky. I didn't scream. I just stood there with the door open and wind roaring like a jet engine. That porch had been there since '89. My daughter took her prom pictures on it. My dog gave birth under it, and now it's gone. I found the swing 2 blocks away, still swaying. Everything else? Somewhere in Kansas, maybe. First responders were stunned to find an SUV lodged halfway into the second-floor balcony of an apartment complex. According to witnesses, the parked vehicle was lifted by extreme winds during the hurricane's peak and hurled across a 40-foot embankment. No one was inside the SUV, and the residents of the affected apartment were unharmed. "I thought it was a bomb going off," said one tenant. Engineers say wind acceleration between nearby buildings likely created a tunnel effect. "It wasn't just strong wind. It was focused, violent wind," said a structural analyst on scene. A 30-foot metal billboard was torn from its supports and hurled through the second-story window of a downtown apartment complex. Miraculously, no one was in the room when it hit. The wind-carried structure demolished furniture, shattered glass, and embedded part of itself into the opposite wall. "It sounded like a bomb went off," said a neighbor. Fire officials said if the impact had happened an hour earlier, during a birthday party in the same unit, there would have been fatalities. The billboard's remains were later found 4 blocks away. The wind came so suddenly that Ella barely had time to grab her backpack. She ducked into a drainage culvert just as debris started flying past like shrapnel. For nearly 30 minutes, she lay curled in mud, listening to trees snap and metal twist. When it ended, she climbed out to find her street unrecognizable. Cars flipped, roofs gone. But the culvert had protected her completely. Later, a rescuer said it was the smartest dumb luck he'd seen all week. When the hurricane hit, 74-year-old Tom Delaney refused to leave his hilltop cabin. He reinforced the windows, tied himself to a structural beam with old climbing rope, and waited. Outside, winds tore shingles and trees from the ground. Inside, the house trembled, but held. "It was like standing in the path of a train for 5 hours," he said. When the storm passed, neighbors found him covered in dust, sipping cold coffee, and still strapped in. "Stubborn doesn't begin to cover it," his daughter joked. Officials warn others not to follow his example, despite the outcome. When the winds ripped the roof from their small home, Ana Martinez had only seconds to react. She threw a mattress over her 2 young sons and laid across it as debris slammed into the walls and shattered glass flew. "It sounded like a freight train crashing through the sky," she said. For nearly an hour, she held still, praying the house wouldn't collapse. The family was later found shaken but unharmed. The house was destroyed, except for the bedroom where they hid. "She saved their lives," one responder said. "Pure instinct and courage." The 140-year-old bell tower of St. Jude's Church collapsed overnight as hurricane winds exceeding 100 miles per hour battered the region. Witnesses described a thunderous cracking sound before the structure crumbled, scattering bricks across
Someone
the
rips
square.
roof off a shed
No one
with
was
the
injured
owner
as the
still
area
on
had
top
been
of it.
evacuated, but the loss of the historic landmark hit locals hard. "It was the soul of this town," one resident said through tears.
Besides a couple of
Authorities say the
bruises, he
winds were
was
too
completely
strong for the
fine.
aging structure to withstand. Volunteers are already planning to preserve parts of the wreckage for future restoration. The downtown business district was left in ruins after sustained winds sheared off signage, shattered storefronts, and caused partial collapses in 4 commercial buildings. The city estimates more than $70 million in damage to infrastructure alone. Crews are still working to clear glass and metal from the main thoroughfares. Of the 123 businesses surveyed post-storm, only 27 were able to reopen. Local officials have requested federal disaster relief as cleanup efforts intensify. An estimated 12 million tons of debris now cover the affected coastal region. Everything from drywall to rooftops to boats thrown inland lies in chaotic piles across roads and lawns. Landfills are overwhelmed. Officials plan to open temporary dump sites and have called in National Guard units to assist with logistics. Cleanup costs could exceed $500 million. The storm was an hour long. The cleanup may take a year, said a federal disaster response coordinator. Following the hurricane's landfall, hundreds of birds were found lifeless across downtown rooftops and streets, apparently killed mid-flight by powerful wind bursts. Experts believe the sudden pressure changes and extreme gusts disoriented or crushed them mid-air. "They had no chance," said a local wildlife official. "It was like a wall of air moving at highway speeds." Residents were stunned by the eerie sight. "It looked like they just fell from the sky," one woman said. Cleanup crews collected the bodies as part of post-storm recovery. Scientists call the event rare, but not unprecedented.